Welcome to the Center Clueless podcast. Podcast takes a day-by-day approach to politics. I'm Billy Ray Brewton.
I am Erik Surwill.
And that song you just heard is from the band Led Zeppelin. And that is our new opening track for Center Clueless.
That would be so good, dude. We absolutely... So why don't, as a meme, I'm not going to find out what it would cost for us to use Led Zeppelin as our...
Actually, let's be clear. The name of our intro song is actually Cast of Characters Isipopada Instrumental. That's the name of our opening track. Our very popular opening track that doesn't sound like a stock song at all.
No, it doesn't sound. But you know what fits the meme of the political. So I'll take it for now. The political news opinion program. I'm happy to do that. Gives you that almost 70s feel. You know, that 70s office feel. Anyways,
I wish everyone could have gone on the journey with me when I went through literally like 150 royalty-free opening tracks, stoned out of my gourd until the right one hit my ears. And of course, and I kid you not when I say the right one was like the third one I listened to. I had to go through all of them and then go back to it.
You're like, shit. Nothing surpassed number
nothing
3.
Surpassed it, so it's back to number 3.
Right on.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the weird, wild, fucked up world we live in. Here in the United States of Scare America.
Scare America. Where did you get that from?
I just made it up in my head.
You just made it up? Okay. No, I felt like I'd heard that someplace, but maybe that's it. I've heard many like riffy off the cuff titles recently, so maybe that's right.
Or I'm sure someone else has come up with Scare America before. I can't imagine I'm the first.
You know what's messed up is when I used to do like when we used to do like Dungeons and Dragons and all that stuff when I was a kid. I remember coming up with, in the early days of the internet, I came up with a campaign. And then at some point I'm reading other people's campaigns, and there was every major like story idea I had in this other person's published online campaign. And it was at that point I realized there are no original thoughts. Just like it's, have you ever seen that? Seen like for you, it would be someone who's written, say, a script that sounds like stuff that you wanted to do, and you're like, hey, have you ever had that?
Well, I actually had it recently. So there's a trailer for a new A24 movie coming out in a few months called Dicks the Musical.
Yeah.
And I saw the trailer for it, and I was like, this is my shit. I mean, it's obviously not. They didn't steal my shit. But like, I was like, this is the closest I've ever seen anything come to the type of comedy that I do in my musical comedies.
Right.
And I'm like, fuck them, because they're going to break bad with it. And I'm going to be like, I'm going to be the grousy old man, be like, I was doing that 20 years before you kids.
They stole my ideas.
They stole my raunch. They stole my brand of offensiveness. God damn it.
Yeah. No. So that's got to be terrible. That's one of the things that kept me away from being a creative or nurturing that is I honestly was that freaked me out as a younger person so much. The concept that my thoughts and ideas weren't original, that just worked me over because I sort of was taught that as a kid. Oh, you're up. No, you're not. So much is the same person to person, you know?
Oh, what a great way to kick off with a nice little dose of nihilism. Well, it's been a very busy week in certain regards. And of course, we'll start off with probably the saddest news of the week, which would be the Maui wildfires.
Yeah.
Which sort of like, I feel like came out of nowhere and just wreaked maximum havoc in a very short span of time.
Right. And by the way, has all the same trappings of the issues in California and elsewhere where power companies don't know how to manage their shit, causing millions, billions, close to trillions of dollars if you take them all together, one big pile over the last 10 years of damage. And that's what's terrible for me. Yeah.
It's, seeing the photographs and the footage of what it was before and after is pretty staggering. Like, I mean, to me, I haven't seen anything like that since Katrina, because you saw those pictures coming out of New Orleans, and it was like it was just like it was gone, and it's kind of the exact same thing in Maui right now. And I've got several friends who live over there, and fortunately, none of them live on Maui. They live on either the the big island or
Right.
around, but it's just every one of them's they're like I can't even express how devastating it is. They're like
Yeah.
it's just gone. It's
There's
just
shots where
gone.
it's like this. It's like the cover of the moon, right? Like it's just like
Yeah,
this
yeah,
crusted. You know what I thought was terrible was immediately there were dummies online going, "Why are all the trees still standing?" And it's just like people that don't know, people that don't understand reality, don't understand how trees protect themselves from fires.
yeah.
And it was for me, it was the immediate QAnoning of this that really
I
bothered me
know.
as well. I was just like, "Come on, you guys." It's like you don't know that trees can last through fires. Like it's and then also the reality that I saw a lot of people. Well, we like your help, but don't come here to show up. Like there's like a lot of that going on, and
Yeah.
I just I feel bad because the entire island's gone. I saw that. I actually wouldn't even know what to do with that as an individual that lived there.
No. How do
I
you?
don't know. Yeah, what do you do?
Yeah, I don't know how you deal with that either. And I think the thing that bugged me more than anything is I don't feel like it's being taken with the same degree of like seriousness as a lot of
No one's talking.
other
Yeah, no one's
similar
talking
events
about
are. And
it.
I'm
Yeah,
do you not realize like this is like one of the most like visited, gorgeous like places on the planet that's just gone.
yeah.
And and I just don't see people reacting to it the way that it's I guess it's easier because it's not actually mainland US, so it's like it's not a place that a majority of Americans are ever going to go,
Right.
so
And I think yeah,
it's not like you drive through Hawaii on your way to visit a relative, right?
right,
Like so
right.
it's removed enough from people where they don't feel like they have to worry about it, but it's like no, it's like it's the United States, motherfuckers.
Well, it's also I think that a lot of people I think Hawaii inhabits this like mystical area in their mind, like more so not only what you said, but it's you know what I mean? Everybody knows about Hawaii. Not
Yeah.
everybody's been to Hawaii, or even most people have been to Hawaii. So because of that, maybe there's a sense of just like disconnection from it. I think I'm just really sort of saying the same thing you did, but I see that disconnection maybe as it being some fantasy place that they're never going to attain, something like that, and they're not digging it. It's terrible though,
Yeah,
and
and it's interesting. Like I think about all the all those Caribbean nations. Whenever there's a big hurricane or something, and like there's real devastation, right? Like lots of lives lost, lots of damage, more lives lost generally probably than during a wildfire. Frankly, that said, I think what people like the damage caused by a hurricane is very different than the damage caused by a wildfire.
right,
And
right,
I'm not saying one's worse than the other or anything. I'm not. I'm honestly not. But like you usually don't see hurricanes that just level an entire community. There's
right,
damaged buildings, there's flooding, there's all of this stuff. This whole place is burned to the fucking ground. I read an article earlier that said the roots of the trees are still on fire.
right. In some
Like
cases, yes.
it's like just total absolute devastation.
Yeah, and I can't get past the videos I've seen, and I know I've already mentioned this, but I'm just going to circle back. If you work at that power company in management, and you're in the management class of that power company, meaning one of the C levels or director level type people, the top layer or two layers, it's entirely on you. It's entirely on you that this happened. And for me, as a in my position being an IT director in a very small org, man, I take a lot of responsibility individually and personally for making sure that some of those things work because my actions affect others. And I can't imagine how these people do their job knowing that they've left people open to this. All they had to do is shut off the power to those lines, and it would not have happened as it did. But there's even video of when it was going down, of the site where it originated. And they knew the wind was coming, and it was because of the super high winds that these power lines got blown down, sparked, and set the whole island on fire. Yes, there's probably stuff going on there with climate change as well, but in a
Yeah.
face of changing weather patterns, you got to deal with it. And if you're providing that type of power, if you're providing that type of service, right, which is the power company, it's your responsibility. and you decided to do it as a private company, fine. It doesn't reduce or lower your responsibility to humanity just because it's a private company. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and I was reading that the siren system wasn't deployed properly. Like they have all these sirens over the island, and that they were delayed, and some didn't go off. And like it sounds like there's going to be a lot of blame to go around here.
Sure.
I think people are going to get caught up in like the whole global warming of it. But I'm like, this could have happened sans global warming. Like.
Yeah. Right.
This really is not something you want to beat the global warming drum on. Like this is just negligence. It's
right.
not
Global warming is the primary cause. It's an exacerbation of the issue. Sure. It's not the primary. It's the primary reason because there have been storms on these islands for all of time, at least all of human recorded history. You should probably put together a system that cuts power to those lines when the wind is whipping them up like that. And because there wasn't water involved, right? Like what you would talk about, it wasn't a hurricane. Fires are rough to keep. Fires are not easy to set and stay lit in a hurricane. Although I know we're now about to get videos, people sending us of hurricanes and fires, but generally there's a copious amount of water involved, which keeps those types of fires. But I mean, the video of the people sitting in the water running from the fire, the whole thing was like complete and utter insanity. It just was. And I think you're going to, I don't know. It's terrible.
Yeah, it's awful. So I would encourage anybody who wants to support folks there. There are a lot of scam organizations that you can donate to. I would recommend AmeriCares. That's where I sent some money from. They're a safe AmeriCares. It's a safe organization to send money through. So AmeriCares.org if you want to help out the folks in Hawaii. I'm one of those people who has never been to Hawaii. I've always wanted to go. I'd always planned on going. So maybe this is my excuse in a month or two to get off my ass and go help rebuild for a weekend.
Right.
Maybe that's my excuse to go do something helpful. But you know what? I feel like, I just feel an itch in my bones for Cancel Corner. That's right, everybody. It's time for Cancel Corner, where we talk about a couple of instances of some motherfuckers getting canceled. And this time, it's not any major people that are getting canceled. But Erik, why don't you start us off and talk about a young person named Jenny Watson?
Well, so Jenny Watson, who is a organizer of a lesbian speed dating event in London, she'd been doing this show for this was going to be their 5th year, but she had asked and actually had set a standard that transgendered women, right, men who were originally born as men who are now transitioned to women, were to be restricted from the event. Generally, the concept there being that most of the people that are involved in her event are lesbian women who have a preference for biological women versus transgendered women who have penises. Really, it's just about the penis, let's be honest. And she's been labeled a transphobe, and now has the space that she was using has said her event can't happen there anymore. She's been doing that event there again this would have been the 5th year. But it's crazy to me that in this liberal West, that people can't select to congregate on sex-specific terms. And I mean, when I was a kid, they had women's only gyms, again, because they wanted, women wanted to be able to only be around other women when they're in a vulnerable position of working out, wearing clothing that was revealing because they're working out. It's really about feeling safe in their activity. And I think that that's what this was. I think that there's also been kind of on the extreme left, on the extreme left, there's been somewhat of an anger towards people that aren't just accepting of the new norms of women having penises and men having vaginas. And in fact, there are going to be many people that are just never going to accept that. And that's, turned into this somehow turned into a judgment towards people who have genital preference as part of their sexual attraction. I don't know. To me, it's just so crazy that you're going to get in trouble for putting together an event like this. I don't understand it. I think that it is ridiculous. I'm going to support this woman in her desire to run an event that is sex specific. And by sex specific, I mean biological sex specific. You're allowed to have preference in your sexual attraction. That's
But
it.
I love that she's being labeled a transphobe. It's like, if she was out there picketing a trans person's right to throw an event with all trans people, then I might say she's a transphobe. Like, like nothing about what she's doing makes her a transphobe. Nothing makes her transphobic. I mean, a lot of lesbian women, regardless of the main reason that they don't necessarily like penises, which is this, it's not their preference. Penises represent something very different. Like, penises represent the patriarchy. They represent male power. They represent all of these things. Like, you have to have respect and grace for that. And if you don't, I mean, sorry, you're part of the problem.
Right. I guess the other thing is that when we talk about queer ideology, and I'm by no means an expert on queer ideology, but there is a segment of queer ideology that essentially says that this type of genital preference is itself corrupt and part of a patriarchal, and now there's sort of people try to tie in a racist, although I don't know how that works, but that there's at least a patriarchal enforcement of genital preference, and I think that's crazy. I mean, here's the thing, man. You and I've talked about this before. You're not really in charge of that as an individual. You're not really in charge of your sexual preference. It just is or it isn't. I think many of us who have been with more than one person have encountered people that maybe we were even ostensibly attracted to, but when you got near them, their smell wasn't what you needed it to be. And I don't mean that they had BO or something. I mean, some people's smells aren't, some people's skin texture. You're like, oh man, no. Oh, they sweat too much, or their hair is too, you know what I mean? It's, in the end, those up close, intimate aesthetics mean a lot. They mean everything. And I would assert to you, and I would assert in general, that it's having those things sorted out that is really the basis of a successful long-term relationship. Because if you're disgusted on any level by the person you're with for a long period of time, you're going to think about it, and it's going to become a problem for you. And that's the reason why that really needs to be sorted out for, I would assert, for long-term relationships and for the respect of people's desires in general. You need to just deal with that. A lot of women who are lesbian, who present as lesbian, who have really always felt that they were lesbians, even before they knew what the word was, these women are not in any way, shape, or form going to accept girl dick in any way. So I think that it's ridiculous this woman's being. And by the way, here's what's going to happen. It's a cancellation, but now the swing is already. What's interesting about the cancel corner, and I'll say this is more of a meta reality, is I think that cancellation is becoming less and less of a powerful action for people to take, because what's going to happen is, I guarantee you, this woman's going to have a venue within the next 2 weeks, max, maybe the next 2 days, and people are going to go on. I think that the seeking to cancel people and to shame people for their beliefs is becoming less and less powerful. And,
it's backfiring, because all you're doing is pushing them further in the direction you don't want them to go a lot of times.
Well, right. That's what I'm saying. That's a danger here now, is that you're going to, almost like the Streisand effect, you're going to bring all of the people, not only who are going to support her, but hate you, and will now jump in together with these people and bring hate to you through that lens. And that's how the extremist portion of society always tries to infect and invade the less extreme portions of society. And that's what you're going to see. You're going to see that. And really what we need to do is, I think that you need to find a way to promote what you believe in without using force or authority against those that don't agree with you. That's the I think the real game, the civilization game. But whatever, who am I to talk?
Well, I think what you're starting to see is like the hysteria is dying down a bit, and it's becoming, I think, more. It's becoming, the conversation is becoming on the ground a little less hysterical and more just like, I don't even know if I have the right word for it. I'll just use examples like here. I would say, and I'm not going to name names, but I was having a conversation with someone at a screening we did the other night, and we were talking about this mutual friend of ours who's trans in town, who's an incredible performer. And we were talking about possibly using them for an event coming up, and that kind of just segued into a conversation about how divided the queer community is right now. And it's like it's the LGB, right? The LGB is on one side and the T and the Q is on the other side, right? And it's like the LGB part is like not understanding a lot of what's going on here, because they're, all that they've been fighting for is something that was chosen at birth. It's something that we don't have any control over, right? Whether we like men, women, both, it's not something we have any control over. And the T and the Q feels like something very different. Now, I'm not saying that they have control over it. I'm not saying that they're, I'm not getting into that argument.
Right.
What I'm saying is like, they're not just fighting to be recognized for something that's been going on since birth. They're fighting to completely change biology, to completely change the vernacular, to completely change societal norms. Like, they're wanting to change all of these things in 10% of the amount of time that it took gay people to actually get basic human rights.
But by the way, less than 10%.
I mean, like 2%. They're wanting all of these fundamental societal changes in a fraction of the amount of the time it took gay people and lesbians to get even basic civil rights. And there's something, and I'm sorry, people may not, there's something kind of skeevy about that to me. I'm just going to be clear. Like, there's
when you say skeevy, you mean like there's something like sneaky or underhanded about it?
No, not sneaky and underhanded. I don't want to.
What do you mean by skeevy? Kind
of it just feels wrong. It's like maybe that's what it just feels wrong. Not that they want rights, not that trans people want rights, but that like they expect that it should just happen so quickly, and like without any idea of, without any like acknowledgement of how long it's taken the entire community to even get the most basic level of rights. Like, it just feels weird and wrong to me. It's like, because I mean, the queer community is fighting for the trans community. I mean, we are on the whole, like, we are one community. We are fighting on the whole, but it's like this idea that everybody just has to completely change our brain wiring and the way that we've lived in a society our entire lives to appease, frankly, less than 1% of the population. Or like,
and the thing is, I think that, without sounding like, some wacko on, like James Lindsay, like there's some sort of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Some sort of secret society out there. I think that look, when the original gay rights wars were happening in the 80s, the 90s in the United States, there were individuals who were further left who were not happy with the conversation around this being around gay marriage. They wanted to tear down the entire structure that existed around sexuality. And to be clear, the same groups of individuals are still there now. They don't want it to mean anything anymore. That the sexual dimorphism, right? The biological female, they want that to be a completely emphasized situation where it's all about gender presentation, gender selection. And I think where it gets kind of weird is you see people that are at the outer edge extremes of this, right? And I mean, these are not people that are unsuccessful, right? Like Martine Rothblatt, who's the person that started Sirius, one of the people that started SiriusXM, CEO of GeoStar. She's also she's one of the most well-paid people in the biological industry. Like I can't remember what company she started, but she absolutely is talking about the tearing down of all concepts of gender, and she's doing so and funding it. And I don't agree with anything she says. I don't agree with anything that the far left gender ideologues believe either. I don't think. Look, I think that you leave. My assertion is you leave the norms in place, and if you're going to deviate from the norms, there's nothing wrong with that. But understand that it's a deviation from the norm. It's not something that you can expect, and that's I think maybe what you're feeling is they expect. Look, you're not necessarily a Gen X. You're an elder millennial, right? But there's something in that age range, Gender X to Gender X. The Xers all the way Gen X down to elder millennials. Certainly, in some of the boomers as well, that you do what you're going to do, and so what if people don't like it, right? That ethic is somehow missing in the newer groups. It doesn't always skew via age, but you don't get to change the preferences, desires, or even hatred of others around you. You have to deal with it. You don't get to take those people and try to tear them down. You got to deal with it. And if your expression is valid, you'll be able to stand in that space of no agreement and be who you are. I mean, everybody that wore makeup in the 80s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, they didn't tell everybody they had to come. They were there to get in your face with it, right? And that's why I've heard people talk about Boy George. Obviously, excuse me, there are other people that wore makeup as part of their artistic expression. Nobody cared. Some people talked about it, sure, but David Bowie wearing, who cared? Marilyn Manson, it was part of the deal. You know what I mean? But what David Bowie, Marilyn Manson, Boy George, what they didn't demand is that everybody now change their preferences to what they're expressing. It's crazy, and I think that maybe that's what's making you icked out. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that is a part of it, and the other thing, and we'll just this is still cancel corner, everybody, but we're going to tie in another conversation point here, and the only reason that this popped into my mind to talk about is because CNN posted an entire explainer article about it, and this is part of the conversation, because my opinion on the whole movement here is that there's not enough grace. There's not enough empathy being given to other people. And it's this force feeding of requirements. And they posted this whole article on what are neopronouns. And from A
was it? Yeah,
to Z.
Was it a guide to neopronouns from
A guide to neopronouns. And what do we mean by neopronouns? We need Zer, Zir, Fay Fair, Air, A Air, and, or as I call it in short, bullshit.
Right.
I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I am not going to use made up fucking words. I'm not going to do it. I don't care who you are. I am sorry. I really, really am. I will call you he, him, she, her, they, them, he, them, she, they, he. I don't care. Like, whatever you want your pronoun, elixir, gumbo to be, I will adhere to that to the best of my ability. I will not create words out of thin air. I will not do it.
Hold on. I asked Zir to come to the movies. Z said yes.
Ridiculous. Like, this is, and we talked about this. This is, I mean, this all sprang forth from Tumblr.
I know. By the way, that one of don't they interview someone that says that that's where it came from? And I'm like, what?
Yeah, it absolutely. I mean, Tumblr. A lot of good things came out of Tumblr. And I'm not even saying this whole, gender expression movement, which did birth in large part from Tumblr. I'm not saying that's a bad thing that it did, but I'm just saying that, it goes a little too far. Like, when you've got people on fucking Tumblr identifying as clouds, they need psychiatric help.
Well, you know what's interesting is and I'm an asshole for not remembering who said this and who wrote it, who expressed it online. But someone expressed online that there was a very distinct. Oh, you know what it was? It's in. Wait, have you listened to the rest of the podcast? The Witch Trials of J.K.
Yeah,
Rowling.
yeah, I listened to the whole thing.
So then you heard this. It was in that podcast that you got the most terrible of the right wing shit from 4chan, 8chan.
Yeah.
And it's now morphed into hate groups. It's morphed into the Groypers, as an example, is the sort of the example of the far right sort of neo-fascist, neo-Nazi movements, right? And then you got the weird shit from Tumblr blowing up on the left to where CNN is writing a program or writing an article on how to properly use these pronouns. And so what you got is you have these, what were considered a toilet and an insane asylum on side. I'm talking about 4chan, 8chan, the toilet, and the insane asylum of Tumblr has now expanded out into society, right? And I refuse to let Tumblrites or 4chan, 8chan dwellers determine what I'm going to allow to happen in this society. You can fuck yourself.
Agreed.
Thanks very much.
Agreed. And no need to harp anymore on that. That's just what I wanted to bring up from CNN because, as I've said before, I will not use made-up words. Moving on to the second side of Cancel Corner, we're going all the way to Malaysia, where our buddy Matty Healy, the lead singer frontman of the band The 1975, has just been fined $2.6 million for a kiss he laid on one of his bandmates in a Malaysian music festival. Erik, what are your thoughts on this?
I just think it's more ridiculousness. See, this is what I'm talking about. Honestly, in the 80s, would anybody even have heard about this? Maybe, right? Yes, if there was a bigger... But it would have been, but to be fair, it would have. I'd seen dudes kiss on stage years and years ago. Like, this is so old, and no one cares. At least I don't care. And the worst I can imagine from the most religious people in my life right now would be, "Why are you looking at it? Did your daughter see it?" Kind of like that, right? Like they would be concerned about the effect on the children, and they would move on. But to find And my understanding is they did it in defiance.
Oh yeah,
right. And so you've seen, this isn't new, right? Like, wasn't it like I remember bands doing this. They were told not to, the Doors were told not to sing certain parts, you know what I mean, of songs, during their television appearances, and they did. Tons of bands have done this, right? And I think that I'm glad that they did it, by the way. I'm glad. Good. Go ahead and start this war because it's ridiculous. Who cares that they kissed on stage? I didn't know if I was going to get past this, but I think I've talked on the program here about, my daughter has seen men kissing in the mall, right? And she's like, "Daddy, can men get married?" And I'm like, "Yes." I said, "It's not as common as men and women getting married, but it absolutely happens." Why? I go, why? I go, where did you get this? Because at first, my panic, paranoid parent brain is like,
you're like, is it time to have a conversation?
Is it no? Is it started in school? Is this something that she heard from some zealous teacher? And she's like, no, there's two boys and they're over there. And she takes me around the corner and there's two guys holding hands, talking to each other in the Burbank Mall. I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm like, yeah, it's totally normal. Liz, don't worry about it. And she goes, "It was different." And she goes, "It's different. It's kind of weird." I said, "You don't like it? Then don't like it." I said, but it's totally normal for them to do it. Kind of like that. It was just, I mean, I so much of it is that, and that right there, right? I realized at that moment that if I fuck up, I could give her something that I might have gotten from someone further up the line, right? Like, this is how intolerance and hate go from parent to child, and I tried to be as careful as possible with that. And I think that what you have in Malaysia, in that country, is they just need to get off it and relax. You know what I mean? It's stupid.
I will say the other, and again, I'm not going to name any names, but I saw a couple people post on social media. Gay people were actually posting I guess that they didn't like what they did because they're not actually gay.
So
And I know I was reading them and I was like, I was sitting there trying to understand the argument. I was
that's a
like,
good one.
wait,
You know, that's a great. You think about how off that is. What defines gay? What defines it? I mean, hold on a second. Look, I'm just going to say it. If you're a man, because this wasn't necessarily uncommon in the day, right? Or scare quotes in the day of men who would engage in homosexual sex for pay, but they weren't actually gay. I just
yeah,
want to be clear. If you're in a porn, or if you're a prostitute engaging in, you may not be gay, but you're engaging in gay sex, and there's nothing wrong with that. But let's not. Why would you even try to? So the question that comes up for me, the way you're these people that you're talking about, why would you care whether or not they were gay? It's about society as a whole accepting that behavior
exactly.
publicly.
It's
So what
exactly
do you
right.
care? What do you
Exactly
care?
right. It's like I'm like, good for them. Good for them I mean, good for them being secure enough in their fucking own masculinity that they can share a kiss in front of an entire audience in defiance of a shitty ordinance. Good for them. Like,
Yeah,
good for them.
isn't that allyship too?
Yes, like, good for them.
Like
I
like
don't
if
under-
like in the definition of allyship, although I don't like that term oftentimes because I think it's abused. Isn't that good allyship to go up there and take a hit? Not even for your team, Eric. You know, again,
yeah.
scare coach your team, all that bullshit, and I get out of here. You know
And
what I
let's be
mean?
clear. Let's be clear. They might have to pay that fine if they ever want to play in Malaysia again. That could be a 2.3 million pound whatever like decision that they made.
Right.
So like, you know,
And if they got the money, maybe they pay it.
yeah. So like, I mean, they probably got the money. They're a pretty successful band.
I
Um,
don't. Yeah. To be fair, can I be honest with you? Before this, I'd heard the name, but I didn't. I realized I remember hearing the name, but it's like I guess I'm not hip anymore, so I don't know one's 1975. I couldn't name one 1975 song.
I don't know that I can either, but that's neither here nor there. Um, you know what, everybody? We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and talk about the two royal families of the United States of America. So stick around after a brief word from whoever the fuck we decide to play a word from, and we'll be right back. We are back with more Clueless shenanigans. So who should we dive into first of the two royal families of the United States? Should we go Biden or Trump first?
I think we go Biden first.
You think we go
Trump,
Biden first?
Yeah, because the Trump thing is so ridiculously bad. So
yeah, let's do that. So let's talk about our boy Hunter Biden, who it seemed just a few short weeks ago was going to be on Easy Street. He had gotten this very generous plea deal. Everything was going great, and then of course the judge was like, "Fuck no, you ain't getting that plea deal." And so now flash forward, and we now have a special prosecutor in the form of David Weiss, who was appointed by Trump, who is the one who brought that plea deal in the first place, and has now been made special counsel, which is infuriating the right, even though Trump appointed the motherfucker. But it's neither here nor there. They're now furious. They think it's rigged. Still think it's rigged, even though he had his plea deal revoked and is now moving towards what could be much stricter and harsher punishment for Hunter Biden.
Right. And what's kind of weird about this is it's not good for Joe Biden that Hunter Biden didn't take that plea deal. Because by taking a plea deal, they could probably put it to bed, right?
Yep.
They could probably put it to bed for the duration of the next 18 months, which is, for the upcoming presidential elections next year, right? And I don't understand. I don't know that the right even. I think that the right is now driven by the pundit, the right's punditry. I think the pundits on the right set what is to be discussed amongst conservatives. It's very odd, right? So it's driving a narrative that's driving eyeballs and ears listening to and watching stuff online. But is it something that's going to help the Republican Party? No. I mean, what I'm talking about is their attacking of David Weiss. It looks ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's like the right's going to immediately begin to eat itself when it at all threatens Trump, his lordship. And it's fucking stupid and it's ridiculous. And Weiss is a conservative. Again, as you've already said, appointed by Trump. What more do you want? What they want is someone that's going to say Hunter Biden should be in jail for the rest of his life. That's what they want. They want someone who's going in there biased against Hunter, and that, in their minds, is the only way they're going to get in, again, a fair, which is ridiculous, hearing. And they're not. It's stupid. It's ridiculous.
And it seemingly gets worse and worse for Hunter Biden. Like, I mean, what was going to be a slap on the wrist, who knows what it's going to be now? Because let's be clear, if he makes them go to trial and doesn't accept a plea deal and he gets convicted, he's getting jail time.
Right.
Oh yeah. You don't not plea, go to trial, and then not get jail time. That's not the way that works.
Jail time. Yeah.
You're going to go to jail, buddy.
Yeah. He's absolutely going down. And the thing is he absolutely should go down for the things he's engaged in. I would assert if he's getting a plea deal, good for him. But if he's not getting a plea deal, you're probably going to jail. For me, I'm still not, how about this? I'm still not having to hold my nose when I vote for Biden. But I'm a hairline away. I'm a paper thin barrier away from having to hold my nose when I vote for Biden over Trump, which is who's going to be the likely nominee unless something happens.
There's a thin line between loyalty and stupidity, and Biden's getting real close to that line.
But I mean, okay, so it's been, so oddly enough, many conservatives, at least 3 conservatives, I have 3 regular conservative people that I discuss things with, they've all said that they understand that Biden is defending his son. And I don't. If that was my son, I'd hang his ass out to dry all day, all week, because it's ridiculous. You don't get to that. That WhatsApp conversation with that Chinese official is undefendable. Is that a word? You're the word.
Indefensible.
Indefensible is the right word. But you cannot defend. You cannot defend that. He was inferring that Joe Biden was on his side in this fleecing, and he fleeced them for money. He used his connectivity to his dad to make money, and people actually have not been happy about that, the Burisma stuff, for a long time. And what's sad is this poison not only splashes back on Joe Biden, but it splashes back on Obama and the Obama administration. And it's like, man, how much does the Democratic Party and the left as a larger entity have to take? Like how much mud has to splash back on them before,
Well, both sides need to just stop pretending. The left need to stop pretending that they're not corrupt like the right.
Right.
And then the right has to stop pretending like every single crime is identical. Like that's the problem. Like the left want to put up this idea of like, oh well, Republicans are the ones who are always involved in like the crime and the cover-ups. Like, no, you motherfuckers have your hands in it just as much as the right do. Like both sides, ain't no side of the aisle clean. And then Republicans just want to live in a world where like what Trump did is equivocal to what Biden or like Hunter Biden did. It's like, no. Because let's be clear. It's one thing to break the law as the son of the president. It is another thing to break the law as the fucking president.
Yeah, and
it's a big difference.
Yeah, and what's funny is the other thing I was just reviewing. The other reason why the Republicans are completely stupid with this, now that David Weiss has been designated as a special prosecutor, the special counsel designation will allow Weiss to charge Hunter Biden with crimes outside of Delaware. Right now, it's just in Delaware. Basically, Weiss being slapped on Hunter Biden is not good for Hunter Biden in any way, shape, or form, nor is it a whitewashing of what Hunter Biden has done. Okay? And really, it's a gift to the Republicans that Weiss is there to basically, well, what's the old school term? Take Hunter to the take him out to the back house and beat him a little bit. He's about to get roughed up legally, and a federal prosecutor is never a good thing. Like, it's funny. There's this guy Popat, Ken White, who used to be on Twitter but now is exclusively on Mastodon. He talks a lot about how terrible it is to have to defend against a federal prosecution, a federal prosecutor with special prosecutor, enhancements.
Yeah,
That's got it's the worst. There's no worse legal position to be in the United States. So why are you crying about it? It's just crazy. More dumbness.
Well, because they think he needs to go to jail for the rest of his life when nothing that he did would require that sentence.
Right. And because, they're mad about Trump.
Let's be clear. Most he's going to do is maybe a year or two in jail.
I think he could do up to 5, right?
I doubt it. Maybe. But I mean, he'll do jail time if it goes to trial. But I don't think it's going to be like crazy jail time.
You don't think they're going to find something gnarly in there?
I mean, they could. I'm not going to say that they won't. I mean, Hunter Biden has proven himself to be a scumbag. So, I mean, so I certainly wouldn't be shocked if they found something worse in there.
Right. There's just this whole mess there that, sadly, I would not be shocked at a Hunter Biden, some type of horrible Hunter Biden story coming out, nor would I be shocked even that Coke was his in the White House. I'm not saying it was, nor do I necessarily, and I don't even think it is now. But if it turned out to be, I wouldn't be like, oh my God, do you believe that? Yeah. No, Hunter Biden is no longer shockingly bad. He's just bad, and we haven't heard all the stories yet.
Right. I mean, the worst part about this is now that it's going to be a much longer trial or a much longer case against Hunter Biden. I just don't want to see another one of these like Hillary email situations where like 6 weeks before the fucking election, someone drops the dime on this horrible thing that Hunter Biden did.
Right.
And it's like, because I mean, look, Democrats right now are putting a lot of eggs in the Trump's going to be in jail basket.
Well, I mean, and it did just come out, Billy Ray.
I mean, let's segue, and we're going to combine our conversations into Biden and Trump. But so yes, a brand new piece of news dropped this morning about Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Georgia prosecutors have messages showing Trump's team is behind the voting system breach. Erik, why don't you talk about that?
So there's at least in the mess, in the morass.
He can't even get words out because it's yet another like, what?
In the mess and the morass of the claims that there had been voter tampering, Georgia was one of the places where it was most heatedly debated. And it turns out that it was a group of Trump-leaning, not just Trump leaning, they were Trumpists, okay? Trump allies I'll just read it. Fulton County District Attorney Fannie Willis is expected to seek charges against more than a dozen individuals when her team presents its case before a grand jury next week. Several individuals involved in the voting system breach in Coffee County are among those who may face charges in the sprawling criminal probe. So it turns out that it was Trump allies who had actually broken into this the voting system, and it looks like Giuliani was at the lead of this. So Giuliani is in particular in trouble. And now the question becomes, does Giuliani, in his diminished mental state, because he is, a lot of people talked about how crazy he is. And if you've read some of the sexual impropriety charges that he's facing, this is a crazy person, right? Like, there are people that have worked with him that have read his words and are like, this guy's cracked now. He wasn't like this before. Will crazy Giuliani include and basically turn on Trump. And I think that the chances are quite high that he does so. So you have a group that, that it was the nutcases, as many people who weren't crazy in the Trump orbit discussed about, called them, that were in the middle of this. And they conspired together to gain access to a voting system, and they actually gained access to a voting system in a way that's not legal, right? And I can't, it doesn't get dumber than this, and it also doesn't get more ridiculous than this. And I know already, what's worse is, I already know the defense of it by the Trumpists, which is going to be, well, when the state's against you, the only way to do it is to break in yourself. It's going to be some bullshit like this, right? That's a justification for the fact that Trump allies broke into and rummaged through, the Georgia voting system.
Let's be clear. It's Watergate.
Yeah.
It's essentially exactly what happened with Watergate.
Yes.
It's just, it's going into a voting system instead of going into the DNC. It's actually worse than Watergate because they are actively trying to rig an election.
Right.
So even just that, let me think about this in context. Just this one tidbit of information that has been introduced in this ocean of evidence against Trump, just this one tidbit is worse than anything they did in Watergate.
Yeah. Yes.
Like, that's where we are. And you still got motherfuckers chirping like, oh, he's innocent. Trump didn't do anything wrong. And I'm like, motherfucker, like.
You combine this with the conversation about, can't you just find 11,000, what was it, 10,500 votes? What was the line?
Yes.
You combine these things all into one pile. They were actively trying to decertify the election at the very least, and at the worst, change the votes and work with Trump to change those votes. It would have been the end of American democracy as we know it. And nobody cares. Nobody cares about that, at least in certain enclaves on the right, certain enclaves in the conservative world. They're okay with Trump doing this. And what's interesting, by the way, is if you go to these people and go, why would this be something that you think is appropriate? There's nothing that they're going to bring up that's going to justify it ever or at all, right? There's nothing like this happening on the left, like this.
No.
Joe didn't do any of that shit. And in fact, if the left has been anything, is they've been, to a fault, they have deferred to the process. Gore, as an example, when he likely won Florida, right?
Yeah.
He still deferred. Yeah. And by the way, to this day, he says, I haven't, so I don't want to get this wrong. I'm pretty sure he has at least said, I guess, or that's the way it was. When someone said to him, do you realize you probably should have won that? He's like, yeah, but for the good of the nation, I gave it up. And he's right. Yeah. It was for the good of the nation. Is it wrong that he did it? I mean, there are people that, could you imagine that battle that would have started at that point if he hadn't given up? It wouldn't have been good for America. So the Democrats, to a fault, will give up early. And right now, what you're starting to see is many in the Republican camp, to a fault, will shit on the process to get what they want. It's a desire for minority rule. It's a desire for a minority viewpoint to control the country. And the argument that's thrown back at me when I accuse people of that, by the way, is always, this is the way the founders meant it to be. And it's just crazy. And I don't care. Nuts.
I mean, people are crazy. And I think the Republican thing, well, part of it is just fear, right? Like, they understand that their party, as it stands today, doesn't have a ton of time left.
No, it doesn't.
They understand that. Like, they know that the hate that they're trucking in is not popular nationally, not on the whole, not a majority of people. And it gets weaker and weaker every single election cycle. And they know this, and they know they're on borrowed time, and so they're trying to get minority rule. They're scratching and clawing and doing anything they can to make their ideals relevant, which they are becoming less and less relevant to a majority of people.
Yes,
and that's what they're doing. I mean, I don't know that I don't know that Democrat is the answer, but like, yeah, it's just it's abject terror.
But you know what else is kind of weird about it for me, and this is something, and I didn't really get this distinction until I was a little older, but I really get it now, that there's a difference between power and force. And what I mean by that is this: if you're going to force people to align with what you think is correct via the legal system. So, for instance, it's illegal to engage in homosexual sex. It's illegal to abort your child. All of these, what are oftentimes religious centric views that they're trying to that many in the conservative right are trying to enforce on the rest of this. To be honest, that unto itself is ridiculous, and you can't force that. And so my challenge to my religious conservative friends has always been, why can't you simply have a story and a conversation that leaves people touched, moved, and inspired to follow what you said? That's real leadership. If I'm choosing of my own volition to engage in a behavior, that is a much more powerful engagement. That is a much more powerful participation than I'm only doing it because I don't want to go to jail. And see, that's what I'm saying. I think that, in fact, I'm going to say something crazy. I bet you if the conservative right, and you're seeing this with some of the trad, look, trads are oftentimes, do you know what a trad is? The traditionalists, like living in the older style, the older style, patriarchal ways of behaving. Here's the thing. All good. If that's the way you want to live as a couple, that's your choice. If that's how you want to raise your children, that's your choice too. Guess what? Your children are going to come out here when they're 18. They're going to see a world full of freedom. And much like, many people do that come out of restrictive religious enclaves, they leave when they're adults and they go live a fuller life. That works for me. If you want to promote conservative traditionalist views, do so, but don't try to make the law that I have to do what you're asking primarily from your religious beliefs. I don't want to hear about your religious beliefs. If it's a good idea, I'll do it. As it stands, as an example, I'm never going to be involved in another abortion, as an example. Meaning, my wife and I, if my wife is to fall pregnant, we're not aborting that child. Look, if the child had major medical problems, fine. There might be a little bit of eugenics going on there, maybe. But the reality is that I'm not aborting a child. And so when my daughter showed up for us, right, she wasn't exactly planned. It wasn't even in our minds to abort that child. We're like, let's go.
Yeah.
Right? Do I believe in a law that should enforce that? Absolutely not. Do you know how powerful it was for us just to choose to keep our child when we could have aborted her if we needed to? The power was, it was a real choice. We really wanted her. And that's what I'm trying to talk about here. What's broken about the conservative right is they no longer believe in testament, in going out and speaking the word of Christ or God. That's the game. If you think that it's going to work with you going out and making laws, forcing people to act in a certain way, you're crazy. And that's how you slip to the left longer and longer and over and over.
Well, that's the problem, though, on the right now is like, yes, they don't go out and evangelize because, I mean, their religious base is shrinking as well. Like, evangelicals are shrinking as a whole in this country. Like, 20, 30 years ago, like, the religious was the majority.
Right.
And that's not the case anymore. And, all of the touch points that Republicans use to sort of prop themselves up and give themselves like energy and fire are going away. And all they have now is like hateful rhetoric and like otherism. That's all they have right now is otherism. You have to be afraid of them because they're different. Like that's all they have anymore. And the minute that runs out of steam, they're toast. They're done.
Right. Otherism, national divorce, all of the divisionary, tactics. And I think in the end it fails. And what's worse is it's going to fail like a whimper. It's going to be, you watch. After this current sort of explosion, which is comparable, although not as crazy as the 70s, I just want to be clear, From
Yeah.
66 to 73, it was madness in the United States. Once we're past that same sort of social upheaval that's happening right now, it's going to be a sad whimper, right? As conservatives lose power over the legal realities of the rest of the United States. And it's going to be sad because you're going to see how many of them were there just because they wanted to hate, not because they actually believed in those ways of living. So, I mean, I could see a traditionalist Christian revival in the United States, but it's not going to be based on hating the other, and it's not going to be based on you got to do what we're saying because of the law. It would be based on we have this thing over here that's loving, that's inclusive, that's family oriented, that loves women, that loves men. Come on over. That might work, something like that. But outside of that, you ain't getting anywhere with hate anymore. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's well, I also want to mention our friends at the Supreme Court, who we always cover on here because people always seem shocked when the Supreme Court sides on anything remotely liberal. And one thing that I wanted to mention was the recent Supreme Court decision on ghost guns. And it was a 5-4 vote, and that would restrict the sale of ghost guns to licensed firearm dealers. And both John Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett voted voted with the Democrats for this.
Yeah.
And this is like some of the first gun legislation that has come around, or not legislation, but that's been ruled on in a while. And it did not go the way Republicans thought it was going to go. And right. we say this all the time on this show. These are individual human beings, regardless of what you think about Clarence Thomas. And I do think Clarence Thomas, there's some stuff that could be investigated there for sure.
Sure. I think he's just a big asshole, but sure.
But yeah. I don't know if there's any much there, but justices are going to vote the way the justices are going to vote. Like, that's their jobs. They are judges. They are justices. They have sworn to uphold the Constitution of the United States. And I know we live in a world where people just, toss their values aside at the drop of a hat. But what this shows is maybe our justices are not willing to do that. Yeah, maybe they are going to do their jobs regardless of, Yeah,
it's also, you could see that there are different subtle, and see, this is where leftists fail. Yeah. The subtle differences in conservative thought, right? That both Roberts and Coney Barrett could see that the cost,
and Kavanaugh, who was voted on some,
right. But the cost to society of allowing ghost guns not only isn't good, right? It's not going to be a good cost. It's going to be a terrible thing. But that regulation of firearms isn't itself against the Constitution. You're allowed to regulate firearms, just like you're allowed to regulate cars. Yeah. Yes, the difference between a car and a gun is there's a constitutional right to weapons, right? But that constitutional right is going to always be through the lens, not only of the language in the Constitution, but the lens of the needs of the current society. Yeah. I mean, these are not new legal concepts. That laws and the interpretation of laws need to change over time is something that is, that's a well celebrated thought process in American legal circles, right? Especially on the liberal side. So the fact that some conservatives see that too is not a surprise to me. And I only wish, because there are liberal people that don't talk to me anymore because of my supposed because of my terrible centrism, Billy Ray. And I wish I could talk to them to gloat over this. To be fair, it's only a desire to gloat. I wish I could gloat and be like, see, you fucking dummy. It wasn't ever going to go like you said, which was, now that we have a conservative court, they're going to basically overturn the liberal order of the United States. Get the fuck out of here. That's not what's happening. And that's not what happened in this case. And ghost guns, by the way, are terrible. They're terrible for a society because as 3D printers become more and more, technologically advanced, we are maybe 50 years away from a Star Trek replicator, maybe 100 years away. But my God, once that's there, to have a law in place that says if you replicate a gun, it's now, you know what I'm saying? It's now got to be accounted for and managed. Like, I'll bet you're going to see eventually that ghost guns, what's going to happen with them is you're going to have to apply a serial number to them after the fact if they're discovered. And the only way they're going to be able to be legally purchased by federal firearms dealers is if there's a serial number attached. You watch.
Which makes sense. Which, shocker, makes sense.
Yes.
Like, crazy that would be controversial. I think what we're also seeing is like Donald Trump, who we know always chooses the best people. In terms of what his edict was from the Republican Party in choosing Supreme Court justices, he kind of fucked that up too.
Yeah, but did he? I mean, didn't he pull them all off the Federalist list? And isn't that the list on the right?
He should have done more research, I guess. He should have done more research. Poor dumb motherfucker.
You know what's kind of interesting is this also, in some way. God, by the way, this is I'm about to say the most cancelable thing on the left. I'm going to say that maybe the Federalist Society wasn't incorrect in their assertions of who should be Supreme Court justice, because what we're seeing is not the conservative fuck the law orgy that many on the left said would happen once we had a conservative court. Yeah, by the way, by the way, they did overturn Roe. But what you're seeing now is that itself was the biggest poison pill that's ever been swallowed by the Republican Party. Fine, Roe's gone now. It was bad law anyways. Ask Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She thought it was bad law. It was bad law. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, if I'm not mistaken, was of the opinion that the Democrats needed to enshrine Roe in law.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So now Roe's gone. Guess what's happening? State after state. Look, Ohio's vote.
Yep.
Here we are now. Ohio's vote was to allow for their existing referendum process to stay in place, which is a 50% vote to change the Constitution in Ohio, and they're going to enshrine the right to abortion next time. And here it comes. And that's in Ohio, which was actually going progressively red from a purple state. And what the abortion argument has done is changed a going to more red state back to going more blue. And it will be, I think Ohio is now a state in play for the Democrats. Once again, as long as the Democrats don't come in and say, you got to use Z's ear. Okay. That's really where it's going to be. You're going to see this break on the social war around gendered conversations, around immigration to this country. These are going to be the spaces where the Democrats are going to need to take a more pragmatic view of these issues and work them out. Right. By the way, I am in no way for a tighter border. Okay, as a person that just finished getting his mother-in-law in here. And the ridiculousness around that, right? She was the ridiculous around legitimate air quotes, scare quotes, legitimate immigration is something that the Democrats are going to have to work on, because if that process worked in a decisive, clear way, and if there wasn't as much fraud as there was, because let's not lie, there are a shit ton of fraudulent marriages in this United States to get people in, tons of it. And I know this from my own personal knowledge. Look, one of our lawyers, not our lawyer that took us to completion, but the lawyers that my wife and I used, they kept going while we were doing this. Oh, that's right. This is a real marriage. And I finally went home to my wife one day. I go, do you realize that most of their business is probably illegitimate marriage? I bring this up in the space of this conversation as an example of something that the Democrats are going to need to deal with to have and have the opportunity to govern, right? You got to have some nuance in the way that you're governing. Nuance includes not demonizing someone because they're on the right and saying that they're going to tear down the Constitution, when in the end, just like what's happened now, we're seeing a very conservative court upholding very you know what I mean, logical laws about ghost guns.
Well,
right?
And part of that is, and look, part of that is the fact that the people on the Supreme Court, regardless of what you think of the politics, they're not idiots. They're in that job for life. They understand that politics is cyclical. they're not going to have to deal with Donald Trump much longer. They're not going to have to deal with
Right.
Joe Biden much longer.
Right.
Trump's going to be gone, Biden's going to be gone, and they're still going to be serving as Supreme Court justices.
Yeah.
And so why on earth would you be an ideologue and just vote on the party line, knowing that you're just starting your legacy as a Supreme Court justice? Like, you're just starting. Why would you front load it with a bunch of bullshit, knowing that you're going to be serving probably another 20, 30 years?
Right.
Like, it makes no sense. Like, you're going to vote the way you're supposed to vote, which is on the Constitution.
Yeah, and it's interesting is that there are huge voices on the left decrying the lifetime appointment. And I'm sorry, you're wrong. It is the lens of the lifetime appointment right now, just like you said, that's keeping these people moored to reality. I would assert to you that if they only had 10 years, they would go in there and they'd hack and slash. I could be wrong, by the way, right? I now sound like every other asshole. But
yeah,
I think that the lens of a lifetime appointment is what keeps the politics of the individual justices at bay. And unless it's a legit... See, people get mad at Thomas because they call him a political player. No, I think Thomas actually believes what he says. And he just happens to be extraordinarily right on some of the things that he says. I think he believes that. I don't think he's there doing the bidding of the Republicans. I think he's there expressing his belief as a judicial, appointee. I think he's expressing his belief as a Supreme Court justice. And so I don't get mad at him for that. I disagree with him wholeheartedly.
I think it's a bit of both. I don't think it's either or. I think it's both. I think it's both and, because I think he's been doing it for he became a Supreme Court justice in such a party-centric way.
Yes.
With like his sexual harassment accusations and so he already came into the office, I feel like, owing debts to that party.
Do you think he's paid those debts off? Because a lot of people like to point at his wife, for instance, and they're like, oh, well, look at his wife. I think respectfully now, okay? I think he thinks his wife is crazy and he lets her do her thing and he just does his thing.
I think he has made has accepted some questionable gifts.
Which ones?
In his, I think any of them could be called questionable when you're a Supreme Court justice. Supreme Court justice.
Does this mean that you can't have rich friends as a Supreme Court justice?
It means you can have rich friends, but when you are voting on policies that could benefit or not benefit them in particular ways, that's a problem. Like that's a conflict of interest. And I think we don't I don't know that we need to have term limits, but I think we need to have a more rigorous ethics policy in place.
Sure.
And I don't mean just for him. I don't mean just for him. I don't mean just for him.
Yeah,
I mean for all of them. Because I'm sure there are liberal justices who have accepted vacations and accepted I'm sure it's not just a right-wing judge thing.
No, it's absolutely not. Which, by the way, is why it makes this current attack against the conservatives on the Supreme Court so hollow to me, because it's been done by almost all of them. Look, there are sitting Supreme Court, I can't remember which ones either. Sorry. One of the Democrats or the Democratic leaning justices won't accept anything. And I get it. But what needs to be put in place is and I would agree with you on this, is an ethics platform that would make things less odious when you found them out. I don't know, though, that, look, when you're in DC, it's an incredibly small, you know what I mean? It's a very small box of people that you're going to encounter as a Supreme Court justice at parties, at events. And these people are generally going to be holding power of some sort, whether it be financial or otherwise. So the fact that Harlan Crow flew his friend around, I actually don't care. And I know that I'm now saying terrible things to some of my friends. But I don't care that Harlan Crow flew Thomas around in his big plane. I just don't give a shit. And I know that the law, that there was I think it was one lawsuit or one case that got to the Supreme Court that Harlan Crow had sort of a tenuous but still a connection to. I still wouldn't have been offended by that connection. Look, I mean,
I'll say this. I'll say this.
I'll finish it this way. We can't expect Supreme Court justices to be like monks and nuns in a fucking convent. Go.
Well, what I'll say is I can't be tolerant of a right-wing Republican power player like Harlan Crow flying Thomas doing all these things, because I know that there's probably some thoughts in his head that he is influencing something. So I can't be okay with that and then be pissed off at like fucking Hunter Biden.
But how does trying
to use his dad's name to like get like I don't know. It's all crap.
How is that influence being applied though? Do you think? How do you think that influence is being applied in that plane? As an example, do you think they're like sitting down? It's like, when you're ruling on cases, do you think he's directly?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know. I just think it's all skeevy. I don't find that any less skeevy necessarily than the Hunter Biden shit. I think it's all skeevy. I think it's all skeevy. I think it's all a violation of like governmental ethics. And I think it should all be quaboshed. Like, I feel like, look, I get it. You're a Supreme Court justice. You're only making $225,000 a year in your Supreme Court job. You ain't making as much money as like, hell, they probably have, there a lot of people make. I know that's a lot of money to most people, but comparatively,
Harlan Crow makes more than that a day.
And it's like, so I get that, if you're a Supreme Court justice, maybe you like getting flown around, maybe you like all these things. And I'm not saying that Thomas is like necessarily trading in on it. I don't know if he is or not. I can't say. I don't think anybody can say whether he is or isn't, frankly, or whether that's influencing him or not. But I think there should be some ethics protocols in place that do not allow that sort of treatment. Right. Where if you are a Supreme Court justice, if you have someone that can be benefited directly or indirectly from a judgment that you make, they can't be flying you all over the place. They can't be finding ways to give you money without giving you money. Like, okay. I just don't think that's okay. Now, I think that has to be applied universally to both sides, to every aspect of government. I don't think it's just a Supreme Court thing, but I think we've got to have more rigorous ethics. I don't care about I really don't. Like, I don't know. I mean, I think there's an argument to be made for term limits, longer term limits.
Yeah.
But I don't think there have to be term limits for a Supreme Court. The Supreme Court's cyclical. It always has been. It's going to be right sometimes. It's going to be left sometimes. It's going to be in the middle sometimes. Like, it's just the way it goes. But this is different. Like, this just feels skeevy. And that's the best word I can use, is it just feels skeevy.
It's a fair assertion. I just think that there are ways where that could be made cleaner. Like, maybe you can't just invite one justice. You would have to invite all the justices, and they would all have to accept or decline if you were going to give, like if you're going to have an event and you wanted the justices there. Something like that, maybe. They got to have lives, though. And it's not also, it also can't be.
They can have lives, but right. I don't think their lives should be billionaires paying their way around the country.
Yeah, but look, what most people are like.
How many public positions have billionaires just flying them all over the country? You don't do that unless you think you're going to, you might have some influence.
Well, I mean, here's the thing.
They're not doing it. They're not doing it to like the head of the local plumbers union, right?
Yeah, but they are doing it to the local LA mayor. They are doing it to that.
Well, that's someone who can influence policy.
Well, what I'm saying to you is that you are on some level indicting the entire American system right now, and I'm okay that you're doing that. But realize what you're doing. What you're doing, and there's nothing wrong with what you're doing, is you're indicting the entire American system. Because I'm telling you now.
I know.
Billionaires rub up against everybody.
I know.
How about this, Billy Ray? Billionaires rub up against people you know.
I know this, but the difference is I feel the Supreme Court should be above that. It's not, but I feel like it should be above that. I think the Supreme Court should be above that kind of influence, because they are the ultimate sayers of what is right and what's wrong. They are the top. Yeah. They are the top of the mountain when it comes to that. And I don't think that they should be susceptible to those same kinds of temptations. And I know they're going to be, because they're just human beings, which is why we need to have some rigorous protocol in place to make sure that doesn't happen. And it's like, look, if you want to get flown around by a fucking billionaire all over the country, be a senator. Like, don't be a Supreme Court justice.
Would it satisfy you if they just had to follow the same ethical rules as other federal judges? Because they don't right now. Right now, the current
I would.
federal
I don't know. I don't
rules
know if
won't
that would
apply
make
to
me
them.
happy or not. I think we need to have very specific rules for Supreme Court justices because it is a very specific position. It is
Right.
the only position that is a lifetime appointee in that in like the top level of government. It is like there are a lot of reasons why that is a special appointment and it should be treated as such.
Okay. I to be fair, I think that if they just made them follow the general rules that other federal prosecutors, or excuse me, judges had to follow, then I think we'd be in a much better place. And by the way, much of what Thomas did wouldn't be allowed under those rules. And so that's kind of the reason why I'm like, they should be if there's going to be a set of rules that federal judges have to follow anyways, the Supreme Court should have to follow at least that same rule set, if not a slightly more restrictive rule set, because of the reasons you discussed. But I don't know that that's ever going to happen.
Oh, I don't know that it will either. I just think it should. I don't know that it will. I don't know that it will.
Yeah.
Hey, look at us. We got through some shit today.
Yep. Yeah. You know, it's funny is this is one of the days where when we're done with the podcast, I'm now more unsettled versus less unsettled. And that's okay, because I just think that all of the stuff that we've discussed, of everything that we discussed today, there isn't a simple solution for any of it. It is all convoluted. And
well, except that Trump and Hunter Biden should both go to jail.
Well, right. But the fact
fact
that they aren't as easily seen as deserving of jail by everybody is where the convoluted bullshit is, right? Like everybody should be able to see clearly that, of course, a fucking grifter like Hunter Biden should be in jail, and of course, a scumbag who tries to take down the country should be in jail. But here we are.
Yeah, here we are. Here we are, clueless as ever. Thanks for tuning in, folks. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next week with more clueless bullshit. And still in September, we're going to have some guests coming on again. So stay tuned for that. We'll start talking about those probably next week, I would imagine. And otherwise, Center Clueless Podcast is produced by Ryan Verrill. Hi there, Ryan. Please visit us at centerclueless.com for more information or find us on the socials at Center Clueless. Please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and tell your friends to tune in. If you have a question, comment, or criticism, I know you got criticisms, you can email us at centerclueless@gmail.com. Be as nasty as you want to be. Until next time, whether you're left or right or somewhere in the middle, we hope you stay a little less clueless. Just like us.